Into the top 5 is Tim Lester taking over for Brian Ferentz as the Iowa offensive coordinator. Just to refresh, we like to use Brian Fremo's efficiency ratings as a way to judge offenses and defenses rather than raw stats. This is Iowa's offensive ranking in the 7 years that Brian Ferentz was the offensive coordinator at Iowa. 121, 92, 88, 57, 53, 44, 35. So his first, they literally got worse every single year. That was in reverse order. So in 2017, they were the 35th best offense. And they went 44, 53, 57, 88, 92, 121, falling off a cliff the last 3 years. If Iowa has a top 50 offense, which somebody might say, like, that's impossible. Well, they did in 2018. They almost did in 2020. Just be competent, and I think you have a chance to have Iowa at the edge of the playoff race, which is why I have them here.
I think so too. I also think it's probably worth pointing out some personnel stuff to like 2017 Iowa. That's a rostered NFL quarterback and a couple of like pretty high level NFL tight ends, right? So there's a personnel piece of this conversation with Iowa's offense as well. But I think they're in a much better spot. I don't think Tim Lester is going to come out there and all of a sudden Iowa's going to have the greatest show on turf. But if they're a top 100 offense, I think they're pretty well positioned because that defense with Phil Parker is going to be good. So it's just about being complementary to that or more complementary to that. And I think Iowa stands a chance to be that this year and moving forward as long as Tim Lester's there.
Number 4 on our list is Travis Hunter, the cornerback and receiver from Colorado, the two-way player. And there's always going to be interest in Colorado and perhaps controversy around Colorado while Deion Sanders is there and trying to reestablish his program. But I think Travis Hunter is just going to play ball. And so whether Colorado has a great season or a really disappointing season, I think Travis Hunter is going to be Travis Hunter, and he might end up being like the shining light of a difficult Colorado season because this guy is awesome. And if they're better, then people are going to be watching Colorado and saying like, wow, could this guy wind up as a Heisman finalist? Shadur Sanders is great too, but I think people are enamored by two-way play, and depending how much they use him on both sides of the ball, we're just going to talk about him, man.
Yeah, regardless of what happens, we'll talk about him. So I'm good with him being on this list. Can I throw another Colorado name at you that I thought about? And like he would not be 4th on this list, and maybe even putting him top 20 doesn't quite make much sense. But Phil Lodeholt, their new offensive line coach, who had this is his first full-time assistant job, was a little bit of an outside the box hire for Deion. I like the swing, but that's going to be the difference for Colorado. As long as Deion is there, they will get, I think, quarterbacks and they will get skill. If they can start building along the offensive line in a meaningful way, which is to say that if Phil Lodeholt shows that he can get this group to gel in year 1, and then that makes it a more enticing situation for high school and transfers alike to go to Boulder, that to me would be pretty impactful for that program long term. So I understand maybe not wanting to put a position coach on the list like this, especially an offensive line coach, but I actually think that Phil Lodeholt might be the most important person in that program whose last name isn't Sanders.
I like it. That's really good. Number 3, Andy Kotelnicki, the new offensive coordinator at Penn State. Tim Lester with higher potential and higher stakes. Do you think Kotelnicki this high makes sense?
Yeah, I think so. Because you're talking about elevating Penn State's ceiling, I think, which is like Penn State is already a very good program, tremendous defensive program. They've had consistency on that side of the ball over a couple of different coordinators, but they've not been able to do that on the offensive side, and they need to if they want to be something more than they've been. Like I don't think Penn State wants to be like the team that just like is on the periphery of the playoff conversation. Sometimes we're in, sometimes we're out kind of thing. And the way you get past that is to be more explosive and creative offensively. And Andy Kotelnicki is the guy that has to get them there.
Number 2, Will Howard, the Ohio State quarterback. Is this the correct Ohio State representative on a list like this? Or would you have gone with Ryan Day or Chip Kelly or Caleb Downs or Jeremiah Smith or somebody else?
I think I might have gone Chip Kelly. When you first laid this idea out to me, the name that I thought of immediately for Ohio State was Chip Kelly, because he is going to have a transformative impact on the way that Ohio State goes about its business this year. And I think goes about its business as long as he is the offensive coordinator. And I think that's going to be good. But it also, I think, in some ways runs a little counter to what Ryan Day has done in terms of being more of a passing forward offense and having that sort of be the identity of the program. So this would be a different Ohio State team. I think it's going to work, but there's a lot riding on Chip Kelly, I think, getting a somewhat new Ohio State offense kind of hitting the ground running this year to go teach championship.
You okay with Howard though? You want me to change it? Should I change it?
No, I think like Howard's interesting too. Will Howard apparently is like more polarizing than I realized. There's a lot of people out there talking about whether or not he's going to be good enough for Ohio State this year. Like I think he's going to be pretty good. I find his transfer to be one of the more interesting maybe over the last couple of years when like he was I think a perfectly adequate, if not average, college quarterback who is now maybe expected to be something a little more, and how much can the weapons around him bring that out of him, I think is going to be really fun to watch.
And number one, I think this is kind of obvious. It's Dan Lanning as the head coach at Oregon. Again, I guess you could go Dylan Gabriel or a player or somebody, but Dan Lanning has a chance to become the defining coach of the North. The idea that if Oregon is the defining team in the North and Georgia is the defining team in the South, and Dan Lanning used to be the defensive coordinator for Kirby Smart, if they somehow would meet up in the playoff for the national championship game, that would be a huge story. But I don't know that this is a huge talking point. He's 7-5 against top 25 teams in 2 years at Oregon. He's 0-3 against Washington and 1-1 against Oregon State. You know, I don't know that we're going to dock him points because they got their doors blown off in his very first game when they played Georgia as the two-time defending national champ in his first game as the Oregon head coach. But like, there's a lot expected of Oregon this year. I think there's a lot of conversation around Ryan Day not winning big games. There's been some big games that Oregon has not. I mean, they only lost twice last year. If they beat Washington the second time, like Oregon might have won a national title, and they couldn't do it. They lost to their rival twice. So I think Dan Lanning is a really good head coach. I think he has really built an interesting culture there. And as much as he went after Deion Sanders for being all about the sizzle, Dan Lanning's got some sizzle too. They also have a lot of substance, but he's not only here because it's like a sure thing. He's the awesome coach of an awesome team. Like, they have an awesome team. They have a chance to win it all, but also, right? Like, they need to play their best in their biggest games. And only 2 years in, they haven't always done that.
Yeah, you get kind of two sides of the coin here with Dan Lanning, which is why I agree with him being number one. Because I think he does have to prove it. He's been very good to this point, but I think he has to prove that he can get to something greater than what Oregon has been, and those expectations are on this program this year. But if he does, like, he's college football's new heel, I think, if he does.
Absolutely. I mean, he's
right.
He is absolutely going to be a dominant force on and off the field because, as you said, like he's clearly kind of embraced what they're doing. And I also think he thinks Oregon can do everything they need to do. And I think there will be an undercurrent of speculation of, will he wind up going back to the South at some point? He's not really a son of the South. I mean, he definitely could stay at Oregon for the long term, but yeah, he's got it coming and going. Like this is ball and beyond with Dan Lanning, and they have a chance to be awesome.